Welcome to Reddit Secret Tales, where we uncover real-life stories so chilling, they'll haunt your nights. Ever felt eyes on you even safe at home? That's how my nightmare started. I was just living my quiet life in Portland, Oregon, until a new neighbor moved across Maple Street. His name was James, and from the day he aimed a security camera right at my bedroom window, everything changed. Strange gifts appeared, roses, creepy letters, even a doll that looked like me. The police called it nothing, but I knew better. What I uncovered in his house was worse than I ever imagined. Stay with me because this tale of obsession and survival will grip you tight. I'm Sarah, and I live alone in a quiet neighborhood in Portland, Oregon. My small one-story house on Maple Street is my sanctuary, with its cozy porch and ivy-covered fence. It's the kind of place where neighbors wave but don't pry, and I liked it that way. That is, until James moved in across the street. It was a chilly October morning when the moving truck pulled up. I peeked through my kitchen blinds, curious about the new neighbor. A man in his late 30s, tall with a scruffy beard, directed the movers with sharp gestures. Nothing seemed off at first, just another guy settling in. But that afternoon I noticed something strange. James was setting up a security camera on his porch, and it was pointed directly at my bedroom window. Not at his own front door, not at the street, but straight at my house. My stomach twisted. I told myself it was probably a coincidence, maybe he was just paranoid about break-ins. A few days later James knocked on my door. I opened it, expecting a friendly introduction. He stood there, hands in his pockets, his eyes scanning me up and down. "Hey, I'm James," he said, his voice low and deliberate. "I've been watching the neighborhood, and you're definitely the highlight." His lips curled into a smirk, and my skin prickled. It wasn't a compliment, it felt like a claim. I mumbled a polite "nice to meet you," and tried to close the door, but he leaned forward slightly, blocking it with his foot. "You should come by sometime," he added, his gaze lingering too long. I forced a smile, shut the door and locked it tight. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house made me jump. I got up, pulled my bedroom curtains tighter and glanced out the window. The camera was still there, its red light blinking in the dark, aimed right at me. I felt exposed, like I was being watched even through the fabric. I tried to brush it off, but the unease clung to me like damp air. The next morning, I walked past James's house on my way to the corner store. He was outside, tinkering with the camera, adjusting its angle. Our eyes met, and he waved, slow and deliberate, like he knew I'd been thinking about him. My heart raced. I hurried past, my sneakers slapping the pavement. When I got home I checked my window again. The camera hadn't moved. It was still locked on my bedroom. I sat on my couch, phone in hand, debating whether to call someone. My best friend Emily lived across town, but she'd probably tell me I was overreacting. I thought about my brother Mike, who was always protective, but he was out of state. The police? It seemed extreme for a camera and a creepy comment. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that James wasn't just a nosy neighbor. There was something deliberate about him, something that made my instincts scream to stay alert. By the end of the week, I was hyper-aware of every sound outside my house. The camera's red light became a constant reminder that James was out there, watching. I knew I had to do something, but I wasn't sure what. All I knew was that my quiet life on Maple Street was starting to feel like a trap. The next few weeks in Portland turned my quiet life upside down. James's camera stayed fixed on my bedroom window, its red light glowing like an unblinking eye. I started keeping my curtains drawn, but it didn't help. The thought of him watching me, maybe even recording, made my skin crawl. Then the gifts started showing up. It began with a single rose left on my doorstep. No note, just a red ribbon tied around the stem. I tossed it in the trash, assuming it was a mistake. But the next day, a handwritten letter appeared, tucked under my doormat. "Sarah, you light up Maple Street," it read in jagged scrawl. My name stared back at me and my hands shook. I hadn't told James my name. I burned the letter in my kitchen sink, the flames curling the paper to ash, but the words stuck with me. James's presence grew bolder. One evening I came home from work to find a box of chocolates on my porch, the kind I'd bought once at a local shop. A chill ran through me. Had he seen me buy them? Was he following me? I stopped walking to the store, started ordering groceries online. But James didn't stop. Every few days another gift. A candle, a scarf, a bookmark with my initials embroidered on it. Each one felt like a violation, like he was worming his way into my life. One night I woke to a soft thud outside. Heart pounding, I crept to my living room window and peeked through the blinds. James stood in his yard, staring at my house, his silhouette lit by the street lamp. He wasn't holding the camera, but his phone was in his hand, the screen glowing as he tapped it. My breath caught. Was he watching footage of me right now? I ducked back, my pulse hammering. I didn't sleep that night, curled up on the couch with a kitchen knife nearby. The next morning, I drove to the Portland Police Bureau. My hands trembled as I clutched the latest gift, a cheap silver bracelet, and explained everything. The camera, the gifts, the letter with my name. The officer, a middle-aged man with a bored expression, barely looked up from his desk. "It's not illegal to leave gifts," he said, shrugging. "And a camera on his property? That's his right." I pushed back, my voice shaking, telling him about James standing outside my house. He cut me off. "Lady, unless he's breaking in or threatening you, there's nothing we can do. Get some thicker curtains." His partner, leaning against the wall, smirked. I left the station feeling small, my fear dismissed as paranoia. Back home I called Emily. "You need to document everything," she said, her voice firm. "Take pictures of the gifts, write down every time you see him. If the cops won't help, you need proof." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. She was right. I couldn't just sit here waiting for James to do something worse. I started a notebook, jotting down dates and details. The rose on October 15th, the letter on October 17th, the chocolates on October 20th. I took photos of each gift before throwing them out, my phone's gallery filling with evidence. But the fear didn't ease. Every time I left the house, I scanned the street for James. Once I caught him outside, pretending to water his lawn, his eyes following me as I got into my car. My hands shook so badly I could barely start the engine. I stopped parking in my driveway, opting for a spot a block away so he couldn't track my schedule. I bought a cheap security camera of my own, setting it up to record my porch. If James was watching me, I'd watch him back. By early November, I felt like a prisoner in my own home. The gifts kept coming, each one more personal. The worst was a small journal, its cover embossed with a quote I'd once posted on social media years ago: "Find beauty in the chaos." I froze, staring at it. How did he know? Had he been digging into my life? I threw the journal into a drawer, too scared to touch it again. I knew then that James wasn't just a creepy neighbor. He was something far worse, and if the police wouldn't stop him, I'd have to find a way to protect myself. November in Portland was gray and heavy, mirroring the dread that had settled in my chest. James's gifts kept piling up, each one more invasive. The journal with my old social media quote was the last straw. It proved he wasn't just watching me from across Maple Street. He was digging into my past, piecing together my life like a puzzle. I stopped opening my front door without checking my security camera first. Every day felt like a game of survival and I was losing. One night I couldn't sleep. The wind howled outside, rattling my windows, and I kept imagining James standing in my yard again. Around midnight, I grabbed my phone and peeked through the blinds. There he was in his driveway, illuminated by his porch light. He wasn't looking at my house this time. Instead, he was hunched over his phone, the screen casting a pale glow on his face. My heart sank as I realized what he was doing. The angle of his phone matched the position of his security camera. He was watching live footage of my house right then and there. My hand shook as I zoomed in with my phone's camera, capturing a blurry photo of him. It wasn't enough for the police, but it was enough to make my blood run cold. The next day I called Emily and told her everything. "Sarah, you need to find out who this guy really is," she said, her voice tense. "If he's this obsessed, he's probably done it before." She was right. I spent hours online searching for any trace of James. Using the name James Carter from a utility bill I'd seen in his trash, I dug through public records. My stomach dropped when I found a court document from Seattle, dated 2 years ago. James had been charged with harassment by an ex-coworker, a woman who claimed he'd followed her, left notes, and installed a camera outside her apartment. The case was dismissed for lack of evidence, but the pattern was undeniable. He wasn't just creepy, he was dangerous. James's behavior grew bolder. One morning I found a package on my porch, wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a handmade doll, its face crudely painted to resemble me, with brown yarn for hair and blue button eyes. A note was pinned to its dress. "I know everything about you, Sarah. We're meant to be." My knees buckled. I stumbled inside, locked the door, and slid to the floor, clutching the doll. The words echoed in my head. He wasn't just watching me, he was fantasizing about some twisted future together. I snapped photos of the doll and note, adding them to my growing file of evidence. I knew I had to act, but the police's dismissal still stung. I couldn't wait for them to take me seriously. That evening I installed a second camera, this one hidden in a potted plant on my porch, angled to catch James if he came near. The next day it paid off. My phone pinged with a motion alert while I was at work. I opened the app and watched, heart pounding, as James crept onto my porch at 2 a.m., placing another gift, a locket with a tiny photo of me inside, clearly stolen from my social media. He lingered, staring at my door, then touched the handle before walking away. I saved the footage, my hands trembling with a mix of fear and rage. This was proof, but would it be enough? I started carrying pepper spray and kept a baseball bat by my bed. Every noise at night made me jump and I barely slept. James's gifts became daily now, poems about my beauty, a coffee mug with my name, even a keychain shaped like the Space Needle, a nod to a trip I'd taken years ago. How was he finding these things? I deleted my social media accounts, but it felt too late. He'd already mapped out my life. One night, I caught him outside again, this time closer, standing at the edge of my lawn. He didn't see me watching from my darkened kitchen. His eyes were fixed on my bedroom window, his phone glowing in his hand. I gripped my bat, my pulse roaring in my ears. I wanted to scream, to confront him, but I knew that could make things worse. Instead, I added another entry to my notebook. November 12th, 11:47 p.m. James on my lawn watching. I had pages of notes now, photos, videos, everything but the courage to face him alone. I knew I needed undeniable proof, something the police couldn't ignore. James was escalating and I couldn't predict what he'd do next. The doll, the locket, the notes, they weren't just gifts. They were warnings. He was closing in and I had to stop him before he crossed a line I couldn't come back from. I wasn't just fighting for my safety anymore. I was fighting for my life. By mid-November, Portland's rain-soaked streets mirrored the storm brewing inside me. James's obsession had turned my life into a nightmare, and the police's indifference left me no choice. I had to take control. The doll, the locket, the late-night visits, they weren't just creepy. They were a countdown to something worse. I couldn't wait for James to make his next move. I needed evidence, something so damning the cops would have to act. So I made a plan. I'd get close to him, earn his trust, and find out what he was hiding. The idea made my skin crawl, but fear was no longer an option. I started small. One morning I saw James outside adjusting his camera. I forced a smile, waved, and called out, "Nice day, huh?" He froze, surprised, then grinned like he'd won something. "Sure is, Sarah," he said, my name rolling off his tongue too easily. I suppressed a shudder and kept my voice light. "Maybe we should grab coffee sometime." His eyes lit up and I knew I'd hooked him. 2 days later I invited him over. My stomach churned as I set out coffee mugs, but I'd prepared. My phone was recording in my pocket, and I told Emily to call me in an hour as a safety net. When James knocked, I took a deep breath and opened the door. He stepped inside, too close, his cologne sharp and overwhelming. "Nice place," he said, his gaze lingering on my furniture, my photos, my life. I led him to the kitchen, keeping the counter between us. We chatted about the weather, the neighborhood, safe topics. But then he leaned forward, his voice low. "You know, Sarah, I've got a special place in my house. For things that matter." My pulse quickened. "What kind of things?" I asked casual. He smirked. "Memories. You'd like it." I nodded, hiding my disgust. That special place was my target. Over the next week I kept up the act. I'd wave when I saw him, ask about his day. He started dropping by uninvited, bringing gifts, a book I'd mentioned liking, a playlist inspired by you. Each time I forced a smile, my phone recording every word. I hated how he said my name like it belonged to him, but I was getting closer. He was letting his guard down and I needed that. Then he invited me to his place. "Movie night," he said, standing on my porch with that unnerving grin. "You ever seen Say 7N? It's intense." The choice felt off, but I saw my chance. Sounds fun, I lied. I prepared carefully. Phone fully charged, pepper spray in my purse, and a text to Emily with James's address just in case. That night I walked across Maple Street, my heart pounding. His house was dim, the air thick with the smell of microwave popcorn. The security camera's red light blinked from the porch as I stepped inside. We sat on his couch, the movie playing on a small TV. James scooted close, his knee brushing mine. I stiffened but stayed put, my phone recording in my bag. He talked over the movie, dropping hints about his collection again. I keep the best stuff in my room, he said, eyes glinting. Private, you know? I nodded, my mind racing. That room was the key. I had to see it. Halfway through the movie, I excused myself to the bathroom. My hand shook as I slipped down the hall, past the closed door of his bedroom. I tried the handle locked. My heart sank, but I wasn't giving up. I needed him distracted. Back on the couch, I suggested we order pizza. My treat, I said, pulling out my phone. While he rambled about toppings, I scanned the room for clues. A keyring hung on a hook by the door, one key smaller than the others. That had to be it. The pizza arrived and I saw my opening. I'll grab plates, I said, heading to the kitchen. James was busy with the delivery guy, so I swiped the key, my pulse roaring. I waited until he was engrossed in the movie again, then faked a yawn. Mind if I grab some water? I asked. He waved me off, eyes on the screen. I moved fast, slipping down the hall to his bedroom. My hands trembled as I slid the key into the lock. It clicked, and the door creaked open. The room was dark, the air stale. I flicked on my phone's flashlight and my breath caught. The walls were bare, but a desk in the corner was covered in papers, notes, receipts, and a map of Portland with my house circled. A locked box sat beside it, too heavy to carry. I snapped photos, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Then I saw a notebook, open to a page with my name scrawled across it. Sarah's schedule. It read, listing times I left for work, when I walked my dog, even when I turned off my lights. My stomach lurched. He wasn't just watching. He was planning. I heard a floorboard creak in the hall. Panic surged. I shoved the notebook back, turned off the flashlight, and slipped out, locking the door behind me. James was in the living room, still on the couch, but his eyes flicked to me as I returned. Get lost? He asked, his tone sharp. I forced a laugh. Big house, I said, sitting down. My heart hammered, but I'd gotten what I needed. Those photos, that notebook, they were my ticket to freedom. As the movie ended, James leaned closer, his hand grazing my arm. You should stay, he said, his voice low. I stood, grabbing my bag. Early morning, I lied, heading for the door. He followed, too close, but I made it outside, the cold air hitting my face like a lifeline. I didn't look back as I crossed the street, clutching my phone. I had evidence now, but I wasn't safe yet. James was unraveling, and I had to move fast before he realized what I'd done. The walk back to my house on Maple Street felt like a marathon, my legs shaky from adrenaline. I clutched my phone, the photos of James's notebook and desk burning a hole in my pocket. I'd seen enough to know he wasn't just obsessed, he was dangerous, plotting something far worse than gifts and cameras. But I needed more, something the Portland police couldn't dismiss. I barely slept that night, my mind replaying the creak of his floorboard, the way his eyes had narrowed when I returned from his room. He was suspicious and I was running out of time. The next day I called Emily and told her everything. Sarah, you can't go back there, she said, her voice sharp with worry. But I had to. The notebook was proof, but I needed something undeniable, something that showed James's intent. I knew it was in that lockbox I'd seen on his desk. I spent the day planning, my hands trembling as I packed a small bag. Phone, pepper spray, a tiny screwdriver I hoped could pry open the box. I texted my brother Mike, who was still out of state, and told him to check on me if I didn't call by midnight. Then I waited for evening when James would be home. At 7 p.m., I knocked on his door, forcing a smile. He opened it, his grin too wide, like he'd been expecting me. Back for more, say 7N? He asked, stepping aside. I laughed, the sound hollow. Maybe something lighter this time, I said, slipping inside. The air in his house felt heavy, the security camera's red light blinking from the porch. We sat on the couch and I suggested a rom-com, something to keep him distracted. My phone was recording again, tucked in my purse. I needed him relaxed, off guard. Half an hour in, I faked a headache. Got any aspirin? I asked, standing. He pointed to the bathroom, his eyes lingering on me. I nodded, then slipped down the hall to his bedroom instead. My heart pounded as I pulled the stolen key from my pocket, the one I hadn't returned. The lock clicked and I eased the door open, my flashlight beam cutting through the dark. The desk was as I'd left it, the notebook still open to my schedule. I ignored it and went for the locked box, my screwdriver ready. It was heavier than I'd expected, the lock stubborn. I wedged the screwdriver in, twisting hard, sweat beading on my forehead. The lock popped and I lifted the lid. My breath caught. Inside were dozens of photos of me, some from his camera, others taken in places I hadn't noticed him. Me at the grocery store, at a cafe with Emily, even sleeping in my bed, shot through my window. My stomach churned. There were notes too, scrawled in frantic handwriting. Sarah at 6 p.m. leaves for work. Sarah alone tonight. Worst of all was a folded letter, addressed to me, describing how he'd make me his forever. I snapped photos, my hands shaking so badly the images blurred. This was it, the proof I needed. A shadow moved in the hall. I froze, shoving the letter back, but it was too late. James stood in the doorway, his face twisted with rage. What are you doing? He growled, stepping toward me. I scrambled back, clutching my phone, the screwdriver falling to the floor. I got lost, I stammered, but he wasn't buying it. He lunged, grabbing my wrist, his grip like iron. You're mine, Sarah, he hissed, his breath hot against my face. Panic surged. I yanked free, bolted for the door, and sprinted through the living room, his footsteps pounding behind me. I burst outside, the cold air hitting my lungs. James shouted my name, but I didn't stop, running across Maple Street to my house. I locked the door, my hands trembling as I dialed 911. He's after me, I gasped, giving the operator James's address. I sent Emily the photos, my fingers fumbling, then sank to the floor, clutching my pepper spray. Sirens wailed in the distance, and I prayed they'd get here before James did. I'd gotten the evidence, but at what cost? He knew I'd betrayed him, and I wasn't sure I'd ever feel safe again. The sirens grew louder, cutting through the Portland night as I huddled on my living room floor, clutching my phone. My heart pounded, each second stretching into eternity as I waited for the police. The photos I'd taken, James's obsessive notes, the letter, the pictures of me sleeping were uploaded to a cloud drive, safe even if he broke through my door. I kept my pepper spray aimed at the entrance, my eyes darting to the windows. Maple Street, once my haven, felt like a cage. The police arrived within minutes, their flashlights sweeping across my lawn. I opened the door, my voice shaking as I handed over my phone and explained everything. The camera, the gifts, the notebook, the box of photos, and James's attack. This time they listened. An officer, a woman with a sharp gaze, studied the images, her jaw tightening. "This is serious," she said, radioing for backup at James's house. I sank onto my couch, relief mixing with dread. They believed me, but the nightmare wasn't over. By dawn, James was in custody. The police searched his house and found everything I described, plus more. A hidden hard drive with hours of footage from his security camera. All of me. They uncovered records of his past, a restraining order from a woman in Seattle, dropped when she moved away, and a dismissed stalking charge in Boise. He'd been doing this for years, slipping through the cracks. The officer who'd taken my statement returned my phone, her voice soft. "You were brave, Sarah. We should have listened sooner." I nodded, too exhausted to speak. Her apology meant something, but it couldn't undo the terror. I didn't stay in Portland. The thought of sleeping in that house, knowing James had watched me for months, was unbearable. I packed a suitcase, left my lease unsigned, and drove to a small town in Montana, a place called Whitefish where no one knew my name. I found a cheap apartment above a bookstore, its creaky floors and drafty windows a far cry from Maple Street. I got a job at a local cafe, pouring coffee and forcing smiles for strangers. It was a fresh start, but I carried the scars. Nights were the hardest. I'd wake up gasping, dreaming of James's voice, his hand on my wrist. Every doorbell made me flinch. Every shadow outside my window sent me checking the locks. I stopped posting online, ditched my old email, and bought a burner phone. Emily called weekly, her voice a lifeline, but I couldn't bring myself to visit her. Trust felt like a luxury I'd lost. Dating was out of the question. Every man's glance felt like a threat. Every compliment a warning. James was sentenced to 5 years for stalking and attempted assault, with mandatory therapy after release. It wasn't enough, but it was something. The police kept me updated, assuring me he couldn't contact me. Still, I wondered if he'd try again someday, if he'd find me in Whitefish or somewhere else. That fear lingered, a shadow I couldn't shake. I'm sharing this because I want others to know. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't wait for permission to protect yourself. I was lucky I got out, got proof, got justice. But it cost me my home, my peace, my sense of safety. I'm rebuilding piece by piece, learning to live with the quiet of Montana's mountains. Some days I even believe I'll be okay. But I'll never forget James, or the way he turned my life into a game I never wanted to play. If you're reading this, stay vigilant. The world is full of people like him, and sometimes, you're the only one who can stop them.